I started at Dartmouth. I finished at the University of Minnesota, and then I went to graduate school at Ohio State in Columbus.
Okay.
The undergraduate degree was in fine art with a minor in psychology, and the graduate degree was in systematic design. I went to the 2005 regional conference, which was up near Olympia, and there were 28 people there. It was awesomely inspiring. It was just a wonderful group of people. It was mostly women. There were like 2 men. And that seems typical of the peace movement, at least when it's getting started. Men are culturally conditioned to, as Marianne Williamson has pointed out, respond to a crisis with fight or flight. Women, on the other hand, respond more with what she calls tend or mend, which is, or to befriend and mend. And women are much more socially motivated, and because they are the ones that bear the children who die in the wars, they're much more closely affected than the men. The men, it's just macho, to be defensive and aggressive. The primary focus is to connect on the personal level, heart to heart, about why we're here and what motivates us. And we also learn simple things about the legislation so that we know what we're talking about, and we learn lobbying skills. A lot of what the Peace Alliance is doing is teaching people how to be citizens, how to be involved, how to set up an appointment with your congressman, take a bunch of people and go and talk to them in a reasonable way so that they can hear you. And we've done that so well that now we get feedback from congressmen's offices that they like us. They're so relieved that we're not in their face angry, and they're willing to listen. And the National Convention is always synchronized with the reintroduction of the bill into Congress. Dennis Kucinich wrote the bill. Always at the opening of a new Congress, he'll reintroduce it, and it always gets shunted off to 3 or 4 committees. And that's usually the end of the story. That's where it stays. But in the meantime, we get more and more co-sponsors. This Congress, we have 70 co-sponsors. Last Congress, we had 75. It tends to hang out right around that number. And people have told us that's quite a few co-sponsors for a bill. It takes 220 co-sponsors to actually call it out of committee onto the floor of the House. But this is one of the things that we teach in the Peace Alliance, is these basic facts about how our government works. Most people don't even know this. We also do public presentations. It's hard to get people to come to those. I think people just aren't quite ready for it. Or else we're just not real experts at PR. So it's not something that's as popular, say for example, as the interest in energy and electric cars. I went to Harris Hall last night, and it was packed with people interested in transportation and alternative energy. People make the connection between those issues and their personal finance and their pocketbook. People haven't made the connection yet between nonviolence and economic prosperity, or personal change in their quality of life. As a result of feeling safer in their own personal community, as well as safer from international attacks, they would feel more connected in their relationships with other people. They would have better education, and they would be physically healthier. It's like a whole systems response. The issue of violence is very pervasive in our culture, and once you start looking at what is violence, it starts to look more like domination. Any form of domination is a form of violence, and it's very systemic. It's very embedded in our culture, in our entertainment. And once we let go of that and we start moving away from competition, which creates tremendous stress, and move towards cooperation, which is the underlying kind of thesis of a Department of Peace. Once we move towards cooperation, I believe that genius will start to flower in the human species, basically. And I have no idea specifically what that looks like, but I'm tremendously optimistic about it. I just think we're on the verge of doing this because the technology, as you might call it, the technology of peace building exists. There are 40 years ago, there were no graduate or undergraduate programs in peace building, and now there are over 300, where people can get degrees and get jobs in conflict resolution and mediation and training and those kinds of programs for other people. And so as this knowledge spreads, it makes it inevitable. Just the way that once we had the knowledge of how to make an atomic bomb, it became inevitable that we would make one. And then it became inevitable that we would actually use one. So I think it's going to swing the other way now. And I think the atomic bomb is obsolete. I mean, it became obsolete the first time we used it. That was it. It's such a foundation belief that the ultimate resolution of a conflict is to hit somebody or shoot them, that it's difficult for people to imagine that it's possible there could be a different way. You know, it's just like, it's the limit of imagination. And so I find myself challenged to empower people to stretch their imagination to believe this is even possible. A lot of people put up smoke screens of defense using other issues like, oh, this is going to cost too much money, or oh, this is the job of the State Department, or oh, we have a peace department, it's called the Defense Department, you know, and which is actually the Department of War with a different name. And so I see it mostly as a problem of vision. You know, the people need to see that this is possible one step at a time. It's not going to happen overnight. We know that. And we know it's not going to eliminate violence 100%. But we know that violence prevention works. We know that the cost to benefit ratio is at least 1 to 7 or 1 to 30. It's going to take more than just putting a floor under housing and the credit system to restore our economy. And when we consider how much we spend in this country on violence, not just military violence, which is like $700 billion a year, but interpersonal violence, which adds up to about $300 billion out of the pocket of the government and $500 billion out of the pocket of the victims, that's $1.4 trillion. If some of that money, 10% of that money could come back into the economy, we could do wonderful things. We have to be patient. We do compare ourselves with movements like the civil rights movement and the suffrage movement. And there are general theoretical models about social change which generally say that things have to get much worse before they get better. So there is a lot of violence in the world right now. And it's sad. And people need to get in touch with their sadness, first of all.